Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Case, which is a podcast where global leaders from Harvard Business School's OPM program join in a personal capacity and they share the decisions, failures, mental models that go behind building enduring companies. My guest today is Shailu Tipparaju. I would want to introduce Shailu, but I've already had a 45-minute conversation with him before hitting record. He dropped a lot of pearls of wisdom. Shailu, I just want to get right into it. What do you think in your interactions with all the OPM folks is something that you see as a common trait between all the leaders?
The DNA of OPMer can be expressed in many ways. I love how you put these conversations together, Sohin, and like you, there are leaders I call amplifiers of emotion. OPMers are incredibly curious, emotional, and resourceful. I use that word in the classic definition of our Harvard School's definition of entrepreneurship itself, which is the DNA of OPMers, and why they're drawn into it either by choice, by guidance by a mentor, by fate of destiny, is the relentless pursuit of opportunities with no regard to resources at hand. The classic definition of entrepreneurship. OPMer folks are very relentless and resourceful. They are curious and emotional. And that's a very, very good recipe for not just an entrepreneur, but a good human as well. And I find that DNA in OPMers because, on one hand, they can connect to people very openly. On the other hand, they can be very incredibly resourceful in how they can pull together something. They definitely are very ambitious, but I think they are, you might not have heard this word in the opium world we use, is they're childlike in the sense they are day one again, they're back to school, they're willing to be, in our world of Harvard, humble, saying that I know enough, but not enough. Let me get back to school, find people like me, and learn again. So they're day one learners. That's how I see OPM DNA.
Shailu, in your career, you've been a serial entrepreneur. You've built three education companies. You've generated over $1 billion in enterprise value, from what I understand. And today you're
Mhm.
focusing on leadership and emotional capital. What is emotional capital?
Emotional capital, if you throw in intellectual, financial, and social into a fine blender of society and harness the right recipe and the right titration. I'm a chemical engineer by trade, so titration as a word comes to me with the right timing, which is when you get the right people with intellectual depth and intellectual capital, the right people with financial depth and financial capital, but the most important is people focused on the social depth and social capital. These three come together and create what we call emotional capital for a person, which is, there's many terms in the neuroscience world and quantum science we deal with, but essentially it means they understand what is the right balance between these three, the people you connect to socially, the people you connect to intellectually, and the people you connect to financially. Of course, in the society, the most easy way to measure someone is financial capital. The next one is social capital because of the pure reach out. And there's digital metrics of social currency. It's also a term now. You look at the digital footprints, and that is social currency. You look at the numbers, you get financial currency. You mentioned some of the companies they build, the value they build, that's financial. The intellectual one is harder to measure. Until you engage with someone, you will not understand their intellectual capital. Even more harder at a much more deeper level. This is like an oil well. On the surface, you easily see the big pillars of financial capital. Everyone can see the size of it, the scope of it, the depth of it, and say that's how big somebody's accomplishments are. For measuring somebody's social capital, there's another pillar that now has been built in the new age media called social capital. Beneath the roots, the basement foundations, the roots are the intellectual capital that is not easy to measure until you engage with it. Even more deeper is the soil, the environment, the grounds on which a tree stands. So the spine of a tree is the financial capital. The branches and all the things that you see are the social capital that are built on a spine like that. The roots are the intellectual capital, and the soil is the emotional capital. No matter what seed, what quality, if it's not put in the right soil, it is not given the right light, it is not given the right nutrition, it cannot bloom to its full potential. That is emotional capital.
What initially drove you to entrepreneurship in your journey?
Same things that we talked in the definition. I think we are all observers of our environment and say, can I create value on my own definition of how an enterprise looks like? I was a corporate employee at Xerox, my first and my only job. And when you look at and observe leaders, you observe things enough and you like to emulate and create a story of yourself to have conversations like these at various stages of your career. Entrepreneurs are people who can take an ambition and give it a shape where the story goes beyond themselves. As a corporate employee sitting in and creating value, a ton of my students are very successful executive corporate employees. They're also creating value in an environment that has been architected for them. Entrepreneurship for me is an environment I have to architect for myself and create value in it. Risk propensity is overplayed in entrepreneurs that they are immense risk takers. I see entrepreneurship is risk mitigators while creating value. So as much as it's celebrated on jumping down the cliff and making a parachute on the way, I will give you the non-traditional insight as someone who's been through the journey is why jump off a cliff to make a good story? If you look at Tom Cruise, he jumped off a cliff in a bike. He didn't make a parachute on the way. They prepared for it for 8 months. So as a movie maker, he's a good entrepreneur. My journey is very similar. I observed what is in the professional enterprise capacity. I took learnings from there and created a system, a framework, a platform, an ecosystem while managing the risks around it, knowing that there are several unknowns. It's been a good run. I think first time when you're a successful entrepreneur, they say right time, right place, right people. Second time, they would say right time, right place, right people, and right timing, right frameworks. The third is very tough because now they expect magic again. So I think over time, individual brilliance becomes a system that you're able to teach others how to do it. Education has always been my fundamental foundation on everything I built. So entrepreneurship was a medium for me to say if my story has to be heard by many, entrepreneurship seems to be the right medium to it.
You just mentioned that it might be more challenging for the leader to outperform himself as an entrepreneur from the previous exit that he or she might have had. However, in your personal journey, after you exited your first company, do you feel there were any principles that you took along with you from your first experience when you started out the second time and maybe the third time as well?
This I will answer it in a two mode way, typical to how I write, which is the things that you succeed, you think are so good and you give credit for all of those and try to repeat them. The things that didn't work, you watch out and say, I will never touch them. In fact, that is not how obviously entrepreneurship works because many of things are a timing and influence of so many factors beyond your control. But what it does help is the credibility and validation. When you walk in and say, I'm starting a company and I'm just a successful corporate employee executive, you're treated in a way where the logo where you came from is the reason they will listen to your story. But when you succeed as an entrepreneur and say, I sold to Bain Capital and now I'm looking at a second one, you're taking very seriously because you've established the way you have built, scaled, sold a company. It does give you an advantage, immense advantage. Like any story writer, any entrepreneur, the pressure is it a one time act? So, yes, they help, but what really helps is what didn't work, not work for second time. The third time is actually when you actually convert them into frameworks. So I would say the second time is just a velocity of the first one and the momentum will be working in your favor. Even dumb ideas can become very successful because pure momentum of the first one. If you get caught up in your own story, the whisper of I'm amazing, that's when you fall the third time. So for me, the second was not tough. The third was gave me the shivers because that's when you would be really given a benchmark. He has become or she has become a person to a system to a framework. Third one is a framework. So I would give more credit to building something as the third one. So examity, I think, would be the toughest one. In terms of lessons, we are working on Magna now. There's a next one coming. We get the same advantage of the second time, now in the fourth one, because the momentum of the third one will help you now. So we're always like day one. I don't get carried away with my own stories. And that's one of the reasons I asked you. The more adjectives you add in your narrative, the more you are still insecure. The more verbs you add in your narrative, the more you are secure as an entrepreneur. So first time to second time, lot of adjectives because it works. It's amazing. Second time to third time, back to verbs. Third time to fourth time is adjectives. That's how I see the wave of. And when I look at entrepreneurs who are sharing their idea, I am a filter of how many adjectives are being used, how many verbs. I love verbs. I don't dislike adjectives, but I think it disturbs the flavor of the verbs. Verbs in the sense action things.
Shailu, you're such a great observer about everything that's happening around you. You come across as a philosopher to
That's
me
right.
as well. Has this been a trait you've always had and you've grown up this way? Or was there a moment in your life where something clicked and you connected with a different side of your personality?
I've been a reader. I think readers are great observers because you can't run and read a book. You have to pause. Just like you can't run and drink water. You have to pause. That's the only way it goes inside your mind and body. As someone who grew up in a town called Mehboob Nagar, where we used to sit by the railway station, I would order more peanuts than we can eat. And people would say, why? Because they would wrap up the newspapers and give you the peanuts. And I could read the things on those newspaper clips. I was obsessive reader. And I think that makes you a better observer of people because you can't talk when you're reading. There's nothing to talk to, you just observe. I highly advise leaders in any capacity, enterprise, entrepreneurship, investment, is to be readers in the sense it is a very active exercise, unlike what people think is a time to get away and read. It is the most active exercise. My philosophy has evolved obviously from 20 years in India and 30 years in the US, and now finding that balance in the Middle East is to look at people like books. You look at them, their stories are like pages. There are some amazing pages, some you want to stay on that page and read it again. There are some pages where you didn't feel the touch or the depth. There are some pages that I don't know fluff. People and books are very similar. So I measure myself in as a learner, lifelong learner and a day one teacher. And I think I measure the day by how many people I meet, how many pages I read, whether they're in the form of a printed book or a walking person, how many engagements happen. It is given a name called Shailosophy because of the philosophy of how I learned Shailu's life through interacting with people. I think there is a definite foundation of the Eastern culture and the Western expedition blending into philosophy. I like action philosophy and not the one which cannot be action, especially in our world of entrepreneurship. If there is an idea, I get instant feedback loop in the social media one-to-one messaging where they take the idea and make something and either apply it in a negotiation, apply it in their branding, apply it in their culture, apply it in their strategy, apply it in their innovation. Old school philosophy was actually mathematics was the philosophy of numbers. Cosmos was the philosophy of how objects moved. That was science. Art was a philosophy of expression of artistic creativity. Everything was philosophy. Back then, philosophy school was the actually only school. Now we have created STEM programs and other programs to make it sound fancy, but I fundamentally see everything is a philosophy. That's a kind of a way I see the world, which is it is a circle with no beginning or end rather than a straight line with an optimal path.
I had come prepared for this conversation with a few questions around your profession, but I'm going to skip through all of that in the spirit of being sincere to the culture that has come through with this conversation. I do want to talk about what drove you to OPM, what you observed there, and how you've been connected with the ecosystem and the participants till today.
I can't give you the actual reason I went to OPM, but I will actually give you a layer of it. As a academic on one end and as an entrepreneur investor on the other end, and pursuit of philosophy as my core academic pursuit. One of the recommendations from the academia, my mentor, my faculty, the Harvard very, very senior faculty, associate deans and deans, one constant that their guidance was is go to this program, trust us on this one. It will be exactly what you're looking for in terms of collection of people that you always seek, curated from across the world, curated across industries, curated across experiences, curated across scale. If you want to travel the world and meet all these people, we will bring the world to you in one classroom. This was exactly the words used. And I can mention the name because I'll be talking to VG next week. He said, trust me on this one. Go to the class. You will change the class will change you. What they didn't anticipate, and I think I had an idea, was how to integrate the story that has been several decades in the making and make it our story. Harvard had a great story. OPMers had a great story, had some ideas on how we can make it a story that none of them had a full expectation on. And in my sense, offer my value back for being pulled into the program. What I got out of it, I think, is far less important than what I gave to it. And it's a work in progress. So, having nearing 10,000 OPMers across the planet over 5 decades, one of the mission we have is the collective us OPM, if it's its own planet. What value are we creating for the larger planet from the four things: intellectually, socially, financially, emotionally? So, my reason to go in was, as somebody who has observed the academia for this long and has gotten thousands of learners through my businesses into school, can I go back and actually sit on the other side of the bench and get my pen and paper? Best decision, I would say, in my life, as many OPMers would say. But I think my mission on giving value to OPM continues, which is the community is the reason why this works. And I've only begun to start putting community together because it enriches me, and it's a selfish act and a selfless act at the same time. So that's how I would see my OPM journey, as still feels very new. Cohort numbers are not as important to me as the people I meet. And you yourself mentioning about what your grandfather has taught you has given me a lesson which I enforce on. Elders can give you immeasurable results. They can fast forward your life and give you 20 years and then put you back 20 years back. Imagine the time you save. So OPM is like a time machine. This is the greatest time machine that Harvard has created among many other programs. The greatest affection it receives in Harvard is also OPM, because we just are people who are affectionate people.
You are involved in organizing a lot of different community events with the OPM network globally. Can you walk me through what the mindset is behind creating these events? What do you try to get out of that, if anything? And what the experience for the participants looks like?
When we talk about events, we have so much of activity around us right now. People are spoiled for choices. So we end up making priorities around our calendar. What we wanted to create as a group, it is not an individual exercise that Shailu did this thing, though I'm getting given undue amount of credit. No matter how much I defend and say it is us, not me, I still get credit, which I'm happy to take anyway. Who doesn't like adulation? But to your point on the value that we bring is people who have said, this is how I go to campus, steal my 3 weeks from my life and work and personal community, and have to come back to my regular life. So we said, we can't go to Harvard continuously. How can we bring Harvard to you and put it in a box and deliver into your world? How can we draw people into these events, which are magnetic, but also take you to the orbit? So they keep your gravity of affection and depth of content, depth of people, depth of engagement, but something in there will give you an orbital velocity to scale up your company. Find a connection that you never knew before. Find a geography that you never planned to open up. So I talked to a lot of folks in OPM Japan. My both sons, Ankush and Dhanush, want to travel to Japan. Nothing to do with any business opportunity, but could open up a whole different world. They're mechanical engineers. You may want to do something very unique in a different geography that you never planned. So the events are a way to bring geography, industry, purpose, and expedition into one blender and let conversations happen, not completely free flow, but a little more organized with a structure in the way the engagement can be very measurable on. If you did, for example, the OPM Indians do this event called Ignite every year. It is to make sure that growth is what you came to OPM. We wanted to apply quantum to it and take it quantum growth. So what you may plan to do an IPO in 5 years, for example. Maybe you'll meet a table with 7 people who did IPO. They could tell you 50 different things, but absolutely no expectation of anything from you because they love that you're part of the OPM community. I think that kind of velocity is immeasurable. Outside of that, friendships are something that have been a very, very carefully, delicately managed ecosystem in what we do these events. People have found mentors for their children. People have found mentors for themselves. I have met parents of OPMers who I'm in touch with. So it's a very emotionally bound thing. The event is not typical, the standard splashy with booths and banners and pitches. There's no such thing. Everyone interacts as humans, and we need more of those human conversations. So it's an enabler of human conversations, I say.
Great. How do Ankush and Dhanush look at your life journey? And a subset of that question is, how do they look at your entrepreneurial journey today, now that you're a parent? And it takes me back to the grandfather conversation I had in some ways. But I'm just curious to learn about how they see your life unfolding.
Parents I talk to people like books early in the conversation. For the children, you may read them many stories, but the one story they're reading is a story of mom and dad, the story of the book walking in front of them. So for both my sons, who one is exactly as old as my first company that has since been established. So they always see it as a walking book of behavior and values, and they want to emulate that. You can imagine how many of OPMers have visited home here, how many have spent time here several nights. So they are an extension of the family for us. So the way they see it is the philosophy, I think, is overdrawn for them as teenagers who are now running 20s. My kids are 20s, one is 17 and 20. So it's overweight philosophy. That's too deep for them. They're deep sea diving. But they see the way dad has figured out to be lifelong, eternally young with new friends suddenly who pop up in a new cohort. So they see OPMers or this family as an extension of their social network. They interact with quite a bit of them. And I think that's the best thing behavior wise parents can do, OPM parents. We have a program we're beginning next year called OPM Echo for the next generation of OPM children. Is to say each one of us have a financial journey, an intellectual journey, an emotional journey, a social journey. How can you create an institute for next gen so they can interact with each other 15 years before they go to OPM? So there's a joke inside Rumil, one of the guys in Baroda, when I visited, I gave the Harvard keychains to them that I got in the Spangler. They're 7 and 11 years old, but they already signed up for OPM 110. So they want to be like his dad. So that's, I think, the reflection my sons would have, which is while they may make fun of me as teenagers, dad, you're so boring in your philosophy, they are constantly inspired and they express it. Their friends follow the same. Any best feedback a parent or a grandparent can have is when the child says, I want to be like my mom or dad. Now, since Sirisha and I both have gone to Crimson, they aspire to be Crimsons in the future.
Amazing. What would you tell the younger Shailu, who's probably 22 years old, if you were starting out again today?
Be less angry and more funny, man. I was not this calm and measured. I was a dragon fireball. I used to shoot 3 times and think once. Now I think 10 times and not even need to shoot a decision. I let somebody make the decision. So I would say, take it easy, calm down. That's what I would tell my younger one. And because I can't be that, I tell my kids, it's okay, take it easy. It shall come back. If it's amazing, take it easy. It shall pass. If it is not so amazing, it sucks, take it easy. It shall pass. That advice, if I gave myself 20 years ago, I'm obviously in my 50s. If I gave to my 20s, I would have saved a whole bunch of fast shoot from the hip situations. I still do, but I still remember to keep myself, take it easy. Not take it light, take it easy.
Very well said. You mentioned reading as a key factor in getting you to where you are today and also developing your life philosophy. Could you mention a book which has influenced or you'd like to share with us?
The Eastern one would be the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. The reason I came to Chicago, because I did a research on it when I was in my teens. That's why I came to Chicago, because of his readings. That book is not an easy read. It takes you through the whole ringer of a few thousand years of our history into few volumes, which is a very, very long and tenuous read. On the Western side, if nobody reads any book at all, but they want to spend their entire life reading maybe one or two books, one would be Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That changed my life. Uh, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Same author. I used to have this pair of books. I think I don't have a count of how many I have gifted this set to. How to Win Friends, Influence People, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. Absolute gems. All the social media that happens right now is a flavor of that writing well before we had a computer and an internet and a smartphone and social media. The principles of good humans and good society, good behavior, how to deal with worry, how to deal with all this mental health, as they call it, all of that in those two books. If there's a extra appetite for the third book and I don't want to read any more books, definitely the 7 Habits Highly Effective People is a strong framework on how companies can be built, lives can be built, communities can be built. I still go back to these 3 books very often. Though I have several thousand in my collection, I would rate these as my top books.
Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else you think would benefit the listeners from hearing from you?
If you know of a future OPMer and you're an OPMer listening to this, do not shy them from bringing them into the fold. I know there's very, very, very successful entrepreneurs who feel, why would I go to college now? I've done all my things, I've done my journeys, I'm not doing it. OPM is for day one leaders to build day 10 leaders. So OPM is almost a responsibility. So my appeal, if folks are listening to OPM, who are obviously OPMers, is to, when you have an extremely life changing experience, what do good people do? Bring their most closest leaders into that fold. So bring people like that. OPM will be for the better, it will enrich each other. That's what I would say for OPMers. For people who have known OPMers, spread the word and tell them, because even so, in I have one word for you, which is to become an OPMer is step one. To become an OPM ambassador, a champion of OPM is your responsibility now, because they will watch the behavior of an OPMer and judge what an OPMer is in the world. Good person, great person, an outstanding person, a legend. How you behave is how they will see OPM. So you're kind of a window and a mirror for the whole world. So for all OPMers, how you carry yourself so amazingly, please continue to do that and keep watching out, because you are the representation of how you shared my name in your WhatsApp. My name, HBS, and OPM. So however you behave, you're carrying Crimson HBS values, you're carrying OPM values. Our family looks up to that. So that's what I would say is you're a reflection of the program and how you carry yourself outside. So be nice.
Thank you, Shailu. I appreciate your time a lot. That's all I have for this podcast, and I think there's a lot of people who will benefit from listening to our conversation.
Happy to do it. One more Teachers' Day, right? I mean, we enter into next year. And this one, I committed to doing it because you always say, who did I meet? I felt great talking to you. How did we feel? We feel that we shared learnings, and what value did we add? This is getting recorded, which means it will go across. And someday, Junior Shah would be reading this a decade later, hearing about it, and say, I want to do OPM 122. Then my prize is paid. I love the convo.
Thank you. Likewise, Shailu. Have a good one.
Take care. Ta-da.